In today's video, we are shooting a fantasy fashion shoot, and we're going to take a plain, boring gray background and transform the scene using projections, gels, and DIY tricks. As you can tell by looking at our beautiful model and the scene, our inspiration for this fashion shoot is The Little Mermaid. But if I photograph this woman in a beautiful dress in front of a plain background, I don't think it's giving us really the fantasy that we wanted. So the idea for this set is Little Mermaid, and I'm thinking to go for something romantic and atmospheric like you would see in a fragrance ad. So I'm going to show you the elements that we've added to give us a little bit of depth and a little bit more of that romance. So to begin with, we actually are shooting on a plain background, but we're going to transform it with gels and projection. So the background that you see here is Savage Universal Fashion Gray, and the reason I've chosen this background is when we add light with color, it's going to reflect that color back towards the camera. So it's going to allow us to shift it from gray to whatever color that we want. Next up, we've added the water to the scene, but the water here is actually just rolls of mylar, and that's going to give us a beautiful, subtle reflection that not only will reflect our model, but it's also going to pick up some of the different colors we're going to add. Then you'll notice that she's leaning against a rock. This is a prop that is commonly sold for photographing children and babies, but here we're going to elevate it and make it look high fashion. And then one of the elements I think is really going to give us a sense of interest and fantasy is these streamers in the foreground. These were around $15 that I bought online, but I know when hit with light and putting them out of focus, this is going to create little bubbles, little bokeh that's going to look really beautiful and dreamy, which fits the mood we're going for here. Now, I am not trying to keep this simple. As you can see, this is already pretty complex. So we're going to go with 5 different lights. And I'm going to build them in step by step to show you what I'm thinking. Now, I think you could get a nice shot with 3, but 5 is going to really give us fantasy. Now, as I am building this shot, choosing my gear first is going to make a really big difference. So for these images, I'm going to shoot with the Canon R5 Mark II, and on it, I'm using the 85mm 1.2. The reason this is so important is because we have these streamers in the foreground, I need to shoot at a very wide aperture so that they go out of focus. If they're in focus, if I'm shooting at f8 or f11, they're going to be extremely distracting. It's not the mood that I'm going for. So I'm going to preemptively set my camera to ISO 100 f1.2, 1/200th of a second. But when you have camera settings like that, you have to eliminate ambient light. You need to get rid of lights on in the room. You need to close curtains over windows. You need to turn off any light because that wide open, it'll show up, it'll affect your exposure. So when I'm shooting these images for real, actually directing the model, we'll turn off all of our ambient light. Our first light is being used to illuminate the model's face. And on it, we have the Westcott Optical Spot with a 150mm lens, which is going to give us a slice of light. So it's going to be the neutral light. So when I start adding color, she's still going to have a true skin tone. All right, let me show you what we're working with for our first light. Now, as it is, there is not much going on in this shot because I've only illuminated just a tiny portion of the frame. So I need to add some other light in order to set the mood, to illuminate the entire background. And so that's where our second light comes in. It is going to be a fill light. Off to the right-hand side, it is a bare strobe, nothing on it, using a blue gel. You'll notice the background and the shadows in the subject will now turn blue. All right, let's get a shot. Now, if I had to, I could make a nice shot out of just these 2 images, but I do think it's lacking a little something. Because I have these streamers in the front, you can barely see them. You see a little bit of reflection, but in this case, I need to add something to light them. That's where they're going to really sparkle. Now, you could do this in a couple different ways. You could add a continuous light. You could add another strobe. It's really whatever you have available. But I want to add a little bit more pink. Right now, the image is primarily blue, but the dress is pink, and I want to bring that color in some other ways. So for our third light over here, we have another strobe. On it is a grid. Now, the reason there's a grid on it is grids control the spill of light. And I don't really want the pink also hitting the background. I really want it to basically hit the streamers in the front. So we have a grid on it, and then we've got that pink gel. So let me show you what it's looking like now that we add a little light to the streamers, and this is where that 1.2 is going to make a difference. So we have our main light, our fill light, our streamer light. What else would I add to this scene? I think it needs to have a little bit maybe a little bit more color, maybe a little bit more depth. And part of the purpose of this video is to show you how to take a sterile studio environment and make it look more like a scene. Take a plain background and bring it to life. And so we're going to use another specialty tool. We're going to use the optical spot you've seen before, but now we're going to add something called a glass gobo. These gobos are really fantastic because they're not just shapes, but they can actually be visual images. So for example, you could have a colorful, detailed stained glass window and project it on a background. But for this scene, since it's supposed to be nighttime with that blue and it's the aerial shot, what we're going to do is add a moon gobo behind her. So off to the left-hand side, we are adding our fourth strobe with that moon gobo. It's going to give us a lot more storytelling to the image. Now, by the way, the company that makes this glass gobo is called Roscoe, and they have so many different patterns and images, and they can even do custom ones. So whatever you can envision, it is possible. So that may be a place that you look for a little bit of inspiration. All right, so we got to our fourth light. What is the fifth? I want to bring a little bit more pink into the scene. You can see the pink on her dress, but I'm not really seeing it much elsewhere in the shot. And so our final light, you can see up above our subject, is a 1x4 foot strip softbox with a pink gel. This is going to add a rim light. It's going to add a little bit more color. So we're playing with everything in those blues and teals and pinks. One of the reasons I think this light is so important to the shot is look at that beautiful highlight on the hair and down the side of her body and the top of the rock. I think it unifies the color palette, but it also makes it much more fantasy. And this really is screaming fragrance ad and dreamy and feminine, and I love it. So with that in mind, I want to add our very final piece of the equation, a specialty filter. The filter I am going to add is a black pro mist, 2 strength. So this is very, very strong. And what it does is it makes the highlights glow. It's going to make everything a little bit softer, but it'll make it dreamier. Typically when I add this filter, I also add a little bit of contrast back into the image. So let's take a look at the difference it makes. It'll also make a difference with anything that is reflecting. Now the shot looks like there's mist or fog in the air, and it is extremely dreamy, but it's a little bit flat. So watch the difference when I add back some contrast and clarity. That's something I always recommend, but it's still going to look dreamy even once you add some of that contrast back in. Okay, so this to me does not look like a boring studio shot. We have created a scene, and we've created depth, and we've created mood. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the shot. Okay, let's do it. So there you have it. These images are so beautiful and ethereal and dreamy. It's a great scene, but it all started with a boring, plain, seamless gray background. But it wasn't one thing that made the image. It was all of it together. From using the streamers to create depth and bokeh, from the gels that we used in the scene to the reflection of the mylar to the projection of the moon on the background. So hopefully you've seen a variety of different creative techniques that you can use for your own work. And speaking of that, I have a brand new lighting recipe guide called Creative Lighting 3. And in this guide, I have so many different techniques, from shutter drag to projections and much more. So I've linked to that below, as well as links to all the gear used to make these images. All right, everybody, see you next time.